Howdy doody, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Gaming with Dimwit and Doozy, your podcast for an opinion on the next generation of video games, as well as the legend of old tabletop games covered by people who only have a vague idea of what the hell we're talking about. I'm your host, Javier. Week by week, I cover a variety of topics, either with myself or with others pertaining to an aspect of topics in the gaming world. This week, I'll be talking about something a bit more personal to me, something I've kind of seen the development of and seen grow with its community and even kind of interact with in a very young age. So, without further ado, this week's episode, I will be talking about the Halo game. So, what specifically we're going to start with? I think we're going to go from start to finish, at least with the main four games in the franchise. I don't know if we're going to have enough time for specifically Halo War game, but we'll see where we go with this. So, starting with specifically Halo Combat Evolved. Halo Combat Evolved, if you don't know, came out in the early 2000s. It was released with the original Xbox, the big blocky one. It was black. It had the old Xbox symbol on it, and traditionally in those days, even the startup screen was more an acidic version of the Xbox in comparison to the more shiny version that we have today. Halo Combat Evolved released. Originally, it was meant for an older audience. As such, when it was first released, my dad and my brother were the ones who were able to play it. They had a lot of fun playing it. They didn't exactly play it together. My dad played it by himself, and then my brother Miguel would go off and play it. Meanwhile, me, I would have to fight for the option to even watch the game. My mother knew of the sort of violent tendencies in the game, so I would go up to my mother and, oh, mom, Miguel's playing Halo. Can I play? Can I watch you play Halo? And immediately, like, she was very, very adamant not watching this. But after a lot of time working at it, she would eventually allow me to sit there and just watch. Like, you know, it was really an interesting experience because for its time as well, Halo Combat Evolved was one of the first, if not the first, video game, specifically shooter video game, to use the dual joystick method. Essentially, what this means is the previous shooters, games such as Doom or GoldenEye, we would only have one joystick. This joystick would be used for looking around and movement. One joystick would do everything. Because of that, the controls were kind of very simplified. But Halo does the dual joystick method, where one joystick, the left, would be used for movement, and the right would be used for looking and aiming. So to that function, essentially, you would be able to have finer movement to be able to move around with a bit more control and actually see where your character is going a lot more. Furthermore, besides just the controls, the game itself was revolutionary for its time. The sort of graphics, granted, nowadays they're a bit outdated, but the graphics for its time were incredible. Specifically, even like rolling out the soundtrack, the graphics, just how everything was presented. This game was state of the art for its time. It was incredible to be loaded into this virtual world and see this magnitude of everything. How you would be dropped into the first mission where you're on the Halo ring and you look around, mountains, look up, and you see the sky, the ring, even a phantom that like flies through the air. It's incredible. It was incredible for its time. And watching this as a kid, it was just like, oh my God, that's incredible. And it was even more incredible to think that my brother had this little, not little, because they were actually pretty gigantic at the time. This black controller in his hand was controlling what was on the screen. It was incredible. And after a lot more convincing of my brother and for nearly wanting to tear my head off a few times for how much I was familiar, I would eventually be allowed to sit down and play it with my brother. And it was really cool. It was a super cool experience to essentially grab a controller and sit down and play co-op with my brother. Granted, it took me a bit of time to get a hold of. I think also because the controllers were a bit bigger, not as ergonomic as they are today. For those of you that are actually going this week, ergonomic meaning more comfortably suited to the hand. So essentially, nowadays controllers are much more meant for people with a variety of hand sizes. You can actually get different size controllers, and on top of that, there's like grips. But back in the day, there was one controller size, and you could pray to God that it fit. Uh, so as such, my brother would teach me, this is right trigger, Javier, or RT, there's LT, RB, LB. He kept shooting these acronyms at me and saying I had to push all these different buttons, and I'm just like, Miguel, I have no idea what you're saying. It took me a while to grasp the concept. Eventually, well, Miguel was walking through it. I got to understand how to move through the game and figure out things. Though and it was incredible. It was an incredible experience. I will say though, going back nowadays playing it, it is quite funny. I want to play you guys a clip from the game where specifically you will be getting the the idea of what the sound was like for this. I'm sure. Sorry. It, so that specific sound bite, that sound clip, that was the sound that would play for a variety of elites. That last one specifically is the death flying sound. And even as a kid, I would kind of laugh at it. And that's the thing. For an older game, it does have its quirks in a sense, things like that, the sound development. Even on top of that, when playing with my brother, me and him realized that you can essentially beat the enemies to a pulp, and as such, the elites would be essential blood bags. You could punch them again and again and again and paint the floor purple, which me and my brother found very fun. It was an interesting time. But for the time, say the art, it's just nowadays looking back on it, you're just like, the polygons. They're so polygons. They're so beautiful. It's beautiful polygon. So there is that. But moving on, I will admit I didn't have to wait super long to play the next games. I was kind of readily accessible to those two, Halo 2 and Halo 3, kind of directly following when I had finished Combat Evolved on my own. Because I think my brother introduced me to the game, and I really started to get into it. I really enjoyed Halo because it's a really cool experience. So I immersed myself in it, and I finished the game by myself, and it was cool. It was super super cool. And I went on to play Halo 2 and 3 with my brother and also with myself again. I was getting better. I was getting better at the controller. At the time, I also moved to the Xbox 360. That was the second generation of the Xbox console, which had much better controllers. Uh, Granted, nowadays, obviously, I had mentioned they're more ergonomic, but I believe the Xbox 360 made a jump in the right direction. They did a very good job of making the controller fit to the player and make it just a lot more comfortable for everyone. So Halo 2 and 3, they are vaguely similar, I would say, in control. There's some defining aspects to each one. I don't want to say they're the exact same, but I would believe that they are of the same caliber. They both were very well done, and they emit the same idea of a very good story, their own unique elements, good weapons, good sound design, good music. It was a really well done. Both of them were very well done, is what I'm trying to say. And like Halo 2, I think in a very defining aspect, which you can see on the cover of the game, is the machine SMG that you get in the game that would actually serve as your primary weapon for a great deal of the game. Granted, you still had the sort of, I don't want to say stereotypical, but the sort of cannon assault rifle that Master Chief would often carry with him. But in Halo 2, you would get SMG would use and it would implement the dual wielding mechanic which was very interesting. It was a very interesting game dynamic that was implemented, and people had a lot of fun with it. And you were able to see how Master Chief is sort of working to fight the Covenant as they take the fight to Earth. And it is a very interesting story. And then Halo 3, where it gets even more interesting because you get now a mix of the Covenant and the humans. Because near the end of Halo 2, the enemy that you seemingly made at the end of Combat Evolved and that you would fight through end of Halo 2, specifically named the Arbiter. The Arbiter would work as the sort of hand of God or the hand of the covenant, because in their world, they're, I don't want to say God, but the prophet, hand of the prophet. They would work out the will of the prophet. They would do things such as carrying out secret missions, but specifically, the option of the Arbiter was to become the Arbiter and work the will of the prophets or die. The Arbiters would never exactly live. They would always be sent on these sort of suicide missions and complete the will of the prophets, the covenant. As such, it was kind of a very honorable position, and yet at the same time, like you knew what was going to happen. But it was very interesting because you actually got to play him Halo 2, but moving to Halo 3, not only did you get to play him, usually, not usually, I would play a lot with my brother, Halo 3. We honestly enjoyed playing co-op campaign missions a lot, and I would be player 2 and he'd be player 1. It would set player 1 to be playing as John 117, better known as Master Chief, and player 2 would play the Arbiter. And you would even get the sort of race specific guns at the beginning of the game. Further into the game, it even kind of sort of subtly tells you that the Covenant and the humans are working together, or not specifically the Covenant, the elites and the humans are working together. The Covenant sort of the variety race of aliens they have. Um, but they would have a blending of weapons where Master Chief would get like a carbine rifle, like Covenant weapon. Arbiter would get like a battle rifle with a human weapon. It was a very interesting subtle story, but it was really cool to view these two games and with very good stories in both of them, very good dynamics to both of them, game mechanics, just good all around. They were very, very good additions to the Halo games. I think nobody would have argued that. Bungie, throughout all three of these games, did an incredible job of selling their franchise and the story that was Master Chief and eventually the Arbiter. And I will say, it there's just a lot of fun things to look back on, and a fun thing that Halo would implement into almost every single Halo game would be extra dialogue. There is a skull specifically in Halo 3 where you can activate special dialogue, which will most commonly come out of grunts. Grunts are these, as you like, they're essentially grunt soldiers. They will go through and do like the work of like the elites. And honestly, they have a lot of funny lines. So I just want to share some of those with
you. I'm gonna pop the top off a can of whoop ass! Game over! Told ya, check it! Oh, don't let it near the nipple! Yeah! Okay, someone bring up the fister! Focus all fire on the demon! He was my best friend! I should have been in a leadership class!
Okay, so yeah, that is the that is the Halo 3 line specifically. And I will never get over that last one. If you, I'm hoping to pick it up, but in the last clip there, the grunt saying, "Oh, I should have taken a leadership class," as he is running with two sticky grenades and eventually blows up. Very, very comical. Bungie had a good time, and I'm sure a fun time sort of making these little, not necessarily Easter eggs, but fun little things throughout their game. And it was just great. It was a game that changed the generation, and it was really cool to sort of grow up with that. Now, now into the fun part. following Halo 3, uh, Halo would actually be passed out to a different developer, specifically 343 Industries. 343 Industries was a fan-made developer of Halo that went on to make the following Halo games. I will specifically only just focus on Halo 4 for time purposes for this podcast. Halo 4 would come out in 2012, November of 2012 specifically. Uh, this would kind of storm most homes. Everyone had been waiting for this game due to the sort of end cutscene of Halo 3 of this massive cliffhanger. So now Halo 4 with the availability to finally continue the Halo franchise. My dad and my brother's dad was gracious enough to get us Halo 4 for Christmas that specific year. Like it came out in November and he got it like almost immediately when it came out. My brother got it. We sat down and we immediately started playing it. But now comes the part where people will either agree with me or disagree. Halo 4 had some amazing graphics. It had great music for the Halo code and amazing weapons. The story was lacking. It was a rough story to get a hold of. It introduced the Forerunners as an enemy and then very quickly would remove them. You essentially are sort of introduced with this enemy, specifically called the Didact. The Didact was this sort of Forerunner individual that is still alive, and he is very powerful, basically all powerful in a sense. He had these sort of powers that would just kind of minimize the movement of Master Chief and even take hold of him, where he could not move, he could not do anything. And even furthermore, while this all was going on, it sells the storyline of Cortana being a degrading AI, as in the world of the Halo franchise, artificial intelligence had only recently been created, and as such, they are only meant to run for a couple, like a year or two, whereas Cortana had been running for 5+ years, a very wide span of time for an artificial intelligence to be running. As such, she was glitching, she was having issues, even after having previously been exposed to a grave mine with a blood entity in a previous game. She had sort of gotten some corruption. And so I will say that that part of the story was very interesting. It's just me and my brother specifically had a lot of issues with the sort of quick introduction of the Forerunner and then the quick at near the end or at the end of Halo 4 sort of removal of the Didact. He came and went. It was upsetting, to say the least, to just see a story plop down like that and to not see some sort of continuation. Furthermore, because even the Didact had some sort of power to take over the Covenant for some reason. He had some sort of control over them due to his Forerunner genealogy. It was strange. It was very strange. And because of that, I kind of hold Halo 4 in a different category than it is hard to get. I feel like it was different. At the very least, I will say Halo 4 holds a special place in my heart for the multiplayer. It was great. As I had mentioned, the graphics and the weapon design and everything was very well done. And me and my brother and his best friend, we would all play Halo 4 together in multiplayer. We'd play rounds and I'd play online matches. Super, super fun. The multiplayer, I will say, was very well done. And for that, I still hold Halo 4 in high regards. I just wish the story was different. But I will say, the Cortana part of the story, that was interesting because it was something that had already held validity in the previous game, and it was something that continued. So I'd like to share another short clip that you can sort of see the kind of stages that Cortana.
I can give you over 40,000 reasons why I know that sun isn't real. I know it because the emitter's Rayleigh effect is disproportionate to its suggested size. I know it because its stellar cycle is more symmetrical than that of an actual star. But for all that, I'll never actually know if it looks real. If if it feels real.
But yeah, it's a very powerful sort of message in that. Um, Cortana was a very interesting character throughout the entirety of the franchise. This idea of an artificial intelligence based off of Dr. Halsey that would follow John 117 or Master Chief throughout his life, and it was very interesting. And nowadays, the Master Chief Collection, the sort of whole comprised of Halo Combat Evolved, Halo Combat Evolved Remastered, which looks very, very good. Halo 2, and Halo 2 Remastered, also very well done. Halo 3 and Halo 4, as well as specific DLCs for Halo 3 ODST, as well as Halo Reach. Sadly, not the Halo Wars games. The Halo Wars games have also been held in a separate category, though the first Halo Wars game was still developed by Bungie. Reach and Halo 3 ODST also being developed by Bungie, whereas Halo Wars 2 haven't been developed by 343 Industries. And the Master Chief Collection, I believe, does a very good job. It is essentially just a collection of the game, but they do a very good job of implementing multiplayer and continuing the sort of very simple but intricate matchmaking system that would allow you to play with a variety of people. Now, crossplay has actually been enabled on Master Chief Collection, and just having a good time. I myself always enjoy a good multiplayer match on Halo and have found great joy in that. But yeah, that is actually going to be it for this week of Gaming with Dimwits and Doofuses. I'm Javier. You can come see a new episode of this podcast on 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday. You've been wonderful. I hope to see you again next week, and have a good evening, everyone. Bye bye.